scientific collaboration and innovation that drive sustainable development and contribute to the shared knowledge, and also contribute to achievement of sharing global objectives. The SDCFA also aims to facilitate the exchange of knowledge, expertise, and resources across borders, and to also ensure that African countries can benefit from and contribute to the global scientific advancement. These efforts are driven by the STCFA as an initiative, and it also seeks to build and work towards connecting a resilient African continent. And also, we also seek to, oh, we also seek to address to connect more um, policymakers, scientists, and put them together to create a network where they can speak about these. Thank you. So with that said, I'd like to call on Dr. Batabile Ramalapa to come and do the moderation for our session. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. I like to be as close as I can to my panelists. So I'm going to sit here instead of going up onto the podium. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this morning for the session. On the role of science advocacy, and I'm positioned at the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research as a senior researcher who works in the field of health innovation, making biotherapeutics delivery systems and formulations that work towards the needs of the African population. Science diplomacy serves as a vital tool in promoting health research and innovation, and enabling us to bridge the gaps between science communities, private industry, and government bodies in order for all of us to negotiate and implement policies that prioritize health security, and to ensure that the fruits of scientific advancements reach all corners of the continent. And for this important session today, I'm joined by my esteemed panelists, who are all leaders in the health innovation industry. So starting with the role Innovation Hub, Dr. Mkobozi executes innovation programs for biotechnology demonstration of the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. Dr. Tsekwa is scale. His work in biomanufacturing product development has led to the transfer of various technologies to the industry and establishment of a biotech spin-out, with which his team developed the first locally manufactured COVID-19 diagnostic kit that was approved by the South African regulator, SAPRA. And in the end, last but not least, we have Dr. Piane Levia, who is a chief Scientific Officer at Doka Bio. Dr. Pian is one of the who worked within the animal health industry in Africa. He has over 20 commercialization in the human and animal health industry. Doka Bio has a One Health approach to infectious disease management, entailing pathogen detection, biosecurity, biosurveillance, disaster management, and early warning systems development management. So our aim for having this session was also to include not just government entities and researchers and industry, but policymakers as well. And I apologize on behalf of Dr. Nike Ndembi from the Africa CDC, who couldn't join us for the session, but I'm sure with the session live streaming and being available online, the policymakers will be able to hear what the researchers and the government entities that stand for SMMEs, like the Innovation Hub, will have to say about how we can find a way to start conversations and implement policies that will ensure that we have health security as a country and as a continent for public health. So to begin my session, I'd like to look onto my panelists for them to emphasize what they see as the intersection of science, diplomacy, and health security within their space. And I'll start with Dr. Puti, who works in the Innovation Hub, which incubates SMMEs, and what that means for SMMEs and in the space where she works in health innovation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Batabile, and also for the Science Diplomacy Capital for Africa for this platform, and also the Bi-Africa Convention platform. We, as the Innovation Hub, are really honored to be part of this. And at the beginning, when I was invited, I was not sure how I'm going to bring in the power of, diplomacy, which is something that we're not active with. But I'm quite excited to engage in this in terms of the strategies that we can be involved with. But it's just to start, as mentioned, the Innovation Hub, our main cause is to support startups. We support startups in different sectors, and there's digital innovations, there's green innovations, but there's bio-innovation, which is quite relevant to this particular conversation, because we are speaking towards health security. And one of my things that I always see that the intersection comes at play, I mean, in addition to the fact that we are talking to stakeholders, and I feel that advocacy and stakeholder partnership towards supporting our startup is something that we could play a critical role. And that's where I want to bring in the aspect of the opportunity of us advocating for policies or guidelines that will watch supporting those innovators in the healthcare space. So I'm really excited, and I think more than anything, it's just the coordination of what the partners can do in addition towards the strengthening of that, because I believe the convention speaks about local manufacturing. We have an aspect of wanting to strengthen biomanufacturing, and I think this is exactly what the CSRR is doing, and also a lot of what government is doing. So I really believe there's a key role that we have to play in advocating for guidelines that will support innovations, manufacturing, local manufacturing, and also just not local manufacturing, but intersection. And I think my role also with regards to the partnership is just the coordination, which I would like to get more on later on with regards to how that coordination can happen. But the other key aspect is the tech transfer that I would just like to mention. They're advocating for tech transfer to commercialization, because we believe that the way that technologies can make a huge role play in local manufacturing is ensuring that there's effective tech transfer. There's lots of strategies that have been spoken about, but how do we really see that a technology from a research institution can be effectively transferred? And I think this is just one of the platforms that I'm really excited that we can look into, and some of the strategies that we are looking towards ensuring that effective, and it can lead to seeing startups thriving in the space and having an effective role to towards economic development. And that's exactly what the Innovation Hub works towards, making them sustainable and play a key role in economic development locally and nationally and also internationally. I'll stop there.
Thank mouthful. Thank you so much, Dr. Puti, and what you've said to develop local manufacturing, local biomanufacturing. And we recently, yesterday, the minister was talking about the launch, or rather the completion of the first phase of what we call the National Vaccine Innovation and Manufacturing Strategy. And it's great that you look onto this and you say for SMMEs, what is the access going to look like? Because it's not just about having a strategy, but also implementing and also thinking about what does it look like for all of the parties involved. And I'm glad that you're here to advocate for the SMMEs locally as to how it is that they can play a role in this. And then we'll go on to Dr. Tsekwa. Dr. Tsekwa, as I said, is a researcher who works in health innovation, VIMS. And Dr. Tsekwa, how do you see the intersection in your field and in what you do that
impact area? And really what we focus on is trying to capacitate the local sector in developing prototypes of vaccines, biotherapeutics, through providing facilities, including pilot facilities and skills that can do the work towards this development. And you can see, and quite clearly from all the sessions that we've been listening to, that science diplomacy is critical. We are a global world, and cooperation and collaboration and partnership and friendship across borders is something that we embrace. I thought that because I'm a scientist from the laboratory, I should focus my thoughts and intervention on maybe a couple of case studies that in recent years, through global partnerships and through science diplomacy, we've been able to facilitate our vision to do our work. I saw Natasha and I saw Professor Banks just stepped out from the ICGB, and I think they explained earlier in one of the plenary sessions that they are an organization from the United Nations system. We have been able to work very closely with them on two initiatives. Actually, I'll focus on one where they are offering and through this UN system organization, we were able to access it, where we went from gene sequences of antibodies for rabies right to a process that has now reached testing in model we are hoping that in the new facility that we are building, the full panel of Lassa viruses that are relevant to our region. And it was through these global networks that we're able to access such resources. I think, lastly, it would be a miss, and I see that our friend and colleague Claudia from the GIZ is here. And she has been a very a strong partner of ours, a course that France is sitting at the back runs as part of the workforce development initiatives of the CSIR. Is something that I am part of from the downstream processing part of the value chain with my team, and through the GIZ and through cooperation of South Africa with JEP, see that the SAVAX community will see some more about this in the sessions coming. Has really enabled us to then capacitate South Africans and the broader African community in training them to then be ready for producing these vaccines. I'll stop with those 3 case studies, and yeah, there are a few more, but truly speaking, you can see very clearly that in our space, the role of advocacy, the role of science diplomacy is quite critical. I'll talk about VIMS. I know you know more about VIMS than I do, but
is a lot more your livestock farmers to export. And that obviously includes being able to detect the disease as it happens, but also be able to control and manage the disease, and where the vaccines are available, apply them. Where they're not available, literally try to design and see if you can keep some sort of emergency stocks to avoid that. So that's just the beginning point. I think there are diplomats, you would know those are ambassadors and high commissioners that are put everywhere in the world for our assistance. I was lucky enough that early on, yeah, but and during the election, I was literally responsible or part of the team that was running around about 31 African countries to implement the program, to set up the labs, to train and have the testing going. And you quickly realize or the permanent secretary wants it to happen. But how do you say you do might really be great. So it is one of those things that I learned early. So as we did our work and we developed, and I'll give some anecdotes on that just as examples. You would find that, as an example, somebody wants you to help with the development of their human capital. And in this case, I would not mention countries, but it could be East Central Africa. And they want somebody to do a PhD with you. How do you, the PhD is a minimum 4 years commitment. Where's the funds? Which university? What are the reagents required? Do we have the samples? Do we even have the lab to do that? Do you pay for the person to come to South Africa, stay where and do what? Because that person literally becomes your burden, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but you are responsible for that person. If you say, let's go to a country in Central Africa and chase a certain virus and control it, it's all well and good. You have your passports, you leave OR Tambo, and you land in whichever airport you do. What happens if somebody is sick? What happens if somebody is arrested, and rightfully so? They did something wrong. They should be arrested. But you are not about to board a plane and say, well, you know what, she was wrong, so she's arrested. We're going home. You have those things. And you quickly realize that we are not geared to the collaboration that we advocate throughout the continent, because there is no backup for the things that are not planned for, especially that are non-academic. I mean, sometimes I remember we reached one of the East African countries where the gay laws are very strong. And one of my team members was gay. Of course, I didn't know. I never asked. And when we get there, obviously if you're in country A and you move to country B, they have laws and rules and you have to work through them and understand what it means. So you meet such things. So somebody is literally dizzy and sick and you go to this place. You're used to South Africa that if somebody is being sick, cannot be denied medical attention. No, you will not get medical attention in somebody else's country. They will send you to a private sector, which demands money before you come in, literally. I wouldn't say extort, but it's close to, and should there be a riot, which is the alternative exit, who are the people you work with that actually have your back? So there's a lot more. And unfortunately, you become an accidental diplomat. once you leave South Africa and you end up in another country, especially in the continent, it doesn't matter whether you like it or not, you are representing South Africa. Your PhD is a South African PhD. That's what they see. Your failures and your successes is South Africa's success or failure. If you promise you will train a PhD student and you don't, South Africa. So it is important that one, as you look at your interests for professional gain or for commercial benefit, you also look and understand what are the national interests. Are they at cross purposes with what you are trying to achieve? Are there any loggerheads compared to the country that you go to? What are the relations between South Africa and that country? Should it matter? It couldn't. It might not matter, but it might affect your success or your failure within that country, depending on what it is that you need to. So I think the more that diplomacy comes to the fore in terms of what it is you are able to do, where do you go, how you are able to do things. I think the more these discussions come out and the more we share why, we do need to be able to collaborate as a continent and be able to look at what are the issues. It's very hard to know and understand the issues in another African country without involving the people within that country that would know the language, would know the culture, would know, because sometimes you go, I work with animals, so it means whichever African capital I go to, I stay for one night in the hotel, then I must trek to the villages where the animals are. So if you get there, you don't know the language. Actually, language is list of the issues. The minimum nuances of somebody looks you in the face or they said yes as they were leaving, it means it won't happen. Or they actually said yes and they walked with you, so it means they're really interested. You don't know that because these are not your people in terms of culture and understanding. So you need to have the local people that will be able to tell you, listen, while he said yes, I don't think he's interested, so that you know what is the issue. What do you solve? What do you do? I remember going to one of these countries and I'm like, yeah, no, tomorrow we'll do this. I think we'll A, B, C, D. And I can see people are not interested. And apparently, what's the rush? You just arrived today. Why are you talking about everything that we're going to do in the week? And to me, it's like, it's business, we do this. No. You must spend your full day and relax. Tomorrow we can talk about this. Then you get a better reception of what it is. I think I'll stop there for now.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Dr. Piani. I think you made some very relevant facts, and it takes me back to when we were during the COVID-19 pandemic, when we were talking about science evidence-based facts, and we were saying, the public health should be based on that. The people should accept it. We have the scientific evidence that this is going to work, or this is how we should respond to the pandemic. But so when we talk about diplomacy, chance to interact with the panelists. But before I do that, I just want to get a final round of discussions, specifically on the specific fields that they work in, and how you know, they see diplomacy as something that can help uplift the different industries, the government institutions that we talk about in terms of gearing towards health security. And I'll start with you, Dr. Puti, because you work in the SMME field and you're trying to uplift and give these SMMEs stage opportunities access in terms of funding, technology transfer and infrastructure, and how you see advocacy and diplomacy as something that they can help towards that, and what are the kind of conversations and the kind of things that policymakers, or as I call them, the decision makers, in making this happen.
Thank you so much for that. And in fact, funding is one of the things that I've put it down because, as I told you, this is one of my first things to engage on diplomacy. But funding is everything. If you ask SME, what's your problem? They'll talk about funding. But I think the key part about it is really goes down to policy making and how the policy works for that. So I had put down some of the things, and I did put the fact that the advocacy to influence policy and funding and also investment priorities, because we figured out that we support different SMEs, but when it comes to health care-based startups, the funding is different. And we noticed that you cannot treat a startups in healthcare as a startups in digital innovation, and Innovation Hub has that diversity. So we also note the fact that they need quite a lot and a long road of funding. And I believe just understanding from the beginning and to the end, seeing a startup thriving and becoming sustainable, there's a lot of involvement. So I believe that the advocacy would also go towards partnership as well, and also ensuring that maybe frameworks are set up in a way that perhaps the fact that there is a clear coordination of when a startup starts from a point of research, and then they go to tech transfer, or let's say licensing of the technology towards a startup and a spin-out company. There's a way that there's funding that they can attract from different institutions, whether it's through international cooperation, which I believe that diplomacy has to work towards, and also just ensuring that there is clear guideline that assures that if a startup comes, there's a clear understanding of who is contributing to it, so we can avoid the situation of having startups having to become we call them startups that get funding from every type of institution. You'll find a startup getting support from TIA, from CSRR giving them support, but we wouldn't be able to track that. So I think we need that clear coordination, and I think a clear framework that works towards that is something that I believe that we could play a critical role, and we are actually getting involved with creating clusters to ensure that collaboration is well inseminated. And the fact that there is the opportunity also for private-public partnership, there's a chance, there's an opportunity to have industry involvement. And I think that's one of the things that I can indicate, that industry's involvement within the startup ecosystem is not something that we've seen working effectively. And just having to see the relevance of well-established industries being involved in the startup, which I'll mention that we want to see them becoming listed on GSE, but we haven't yet seen any of those being like Moderna, creating mRNAs, and we have a long way towards that. But I think it's something that I would like us to start creating that ecosystem, and that will also speak to the frameworks that are created towards the support of the startups. And I think one of the things that I also just want to quickly mention is the fact that you mentioned science-based evidence. So I also think as engaging in evidence-based policy engagement, I called it evidence-based policy development or deployment of that particular thing, is something that we would want to participate in, and to contribute effectively to see how that works. But I like what Dr. Tsokwa also mentioned with the institutions that they're working with, and advocating for partnership, and it's something that will help us to kind of get funding that collaborate to let the science, the National Science of Innovation work more effectively. And it's something that I really see as opening ourselves towards cooperation and coordination of the ecosystem in general for startups. Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Chiloba. I really like the fact that you emphasized on partnership, and how, startups in South Africa, we lose track of how they grow and where they go to. We know that there's a startup, we incubating them, and for the first few years that the startup, has developed, we are helping them out. But it seemed as if somewhere along the line, we leave them to just fend for themselves, and that's how we see them fade into the system. So it's very important that you mentioned also that we need to develop an ecosystem so that we don't let people fade somewhere out there where they are now fending for themselves, and we have no large industry involved with them. The government, has incubated them for 2 years, and that's it. We really need to build a better and efficient ecosystem towards that. Yeah. Dr. Tsekwa, you mentioned a local capacity, local building of local capacity, local manufacturing capacity, which is what we were talking about with the vaccine innovation and manufacturing strategy. And I'd like to know how you think we could involve advocacy and diplomacy in this, in terms of local capacity building, and also because COVID-19 has taught us, and I think future pandemics will also tell us this. And I say future pandemics because even though as people we like, or we really dream of a world where there are no future pandemics, with what we're seeing, we know that there is evidence to prove that there are going to be future pandemics. So what pandemics show us is that you cannot talk about national health security. You have to talk about global health security, because we've seen how it's so easy for a pandemic to spread. So how do we involve advocacy and science diplomacy in terms of local manufacturing for one country or for the continent in order to ensure global health security?
No, thanks for that question. There was a memorable part of the convention yesterday, and I think many of us will recall the minister's words. Where he made an analogy around the swimming pool, and this analogy I think is very powerful, because in the event of an outbreak, wherever it may be, quite clearly, because we're very mobile today, viral and other diseases will reach the entire globe quite rapidly. And so in that context, when we talk about local capacity and local manufacturing, it's clear that our ability here in South Africa and here on the continent to start to manufacture our own health products, including vaccines, is quite critical, because our capacity here today will protect the entire world. Clearly, it's a science diplomacy issue. I had a very nice session where I think this issue just highlights the importance of harmonization or of collaboration. There was a very nice session yesterday chaired by one of our colleagues from WHO, and many of the regulators in Africa and across the globe actually were on the panel, including Dr. Dumi, who's a very good friend. And I ask a question I ask regularly. So we have regulations here in South Africa that will facilitate licensure of a product, but we have this jigsaw puzzle of different regulations. And I also reduced it to an area of my passion, where if we are able to license our phase 1 investigational facility at the CSIR here in South Africa, and it's able to produce materials under the inspectorate of the SAPRA, what are the implications then for our ability to deploy those same products across the continent and across the world? And clearly, through negotiated diplomacy-led effort, right next door, we have a session with the AMA talking about harmonization. Clearly, that process of finding common ground and finding a position where our regulations here in this country are also relied upon or even harmonized with those of our neighbors makes complete sense. The analogy can apply in many different scenarios. The other very important issue where in the space where I work, we want to develop candidate vaccines. Clearly surveillance, clearly data and information coming from the outbreak region is quite critical. Ultimately, the vaccine you make will be informed by those samples that are collected in those regions, and our partnerships. We have just entered into a new network, a Geyser network, through partnerships through America and some of our philanthropy funders. The Geyser network has a network of public health and laboratory researchers across the continent that are accessing NIPA samples, that are accessing samples for even other coronaviruses, various different potential threats. And through those networks, we're able to have very early sequence information that can inform our work in candidate vaccines, that can inform our work in making monoclonals for protecting people initially. We can see very, very clearly that we don't often see it in the laboratory, but your topic and your session really, having applied my mind, it's really very, very relevant today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tsekwa. And I'm glad you also highlighted the regulatory responses that we need to have towards health security, because we know that in South Africa, I think I stand to be corrected, but we only have 5 countries with regulatory bodies that are efficient enough to regulate health products. And think about it, how many 52 states that we have in the continent and only 5 regulatory bodies. How do you harmonize that to ensure that every single health product, every single vaccine that is spread across the continent is safe and effective for all of the citizens of the continent? It's a mammoth task, but it's something that we need to do. And that's why I think you mentioned that there is a need for harmonization, but it's only going to be possible through advocacy. And as I say, decision makers, policy makers, trying to ensure that whatever capability we have between the 5 states that have capability for regulatory, it can be extended to other countries so that it doesn't become a thing of before a country towards the north gets a vaccine, it has to be approved in the south, and then traveling all the way to the north. How then is it possible for them to have access to a safe vaccine if the regulator in the south doesn't have it has the capability but not the capacity to be able to regulate all those health products? So that's something that it is really something that we should put on the agenda, and it's an emergency, in fact, for us to be able to have regulatory bodies across the continent that can handle that in order for us to ensure health security for the continent and globally as well. Dr. Piane, so as we've mentioned, you work a lot in animal health, which is something that I mean, if you think about like pandemic 19, it was, I mean, amongst the research, they're still trying to negotiate that. Is it a zoonotic disease? Is it not? But I mean, a lot of evidence points towards it being a zoonotic disease. Mpox is a zoonotic disease. So it shows us that if we are able to at least get health products, vaccines in terms of animal health, it will help us towards our responses towards in human health when it comes to pandemic. So I'd like you to talk to us, and I'd like to ask you the question on how we can create or engage with policymakers in terms of engaging, in terms of creating enabling environments when it comes to innovation, exploring incentives, making sure that they are frameworks that speak to the work that you were talking about in terms of you know, when you talk about animal health, it's not something that you can focus on one country. It has to be something where policymakers are involved so that it's spread across the region. So how do we create those conversations? What is it that we'd like to see be done?
Thank you. I think that's an important question, which talks to is what we would do if that outbreak was in humans. In short, animals, you cannot tell them to do a 1 meter distancing. You you cannot control where they go. You cannot call their name and they're like, I'm present. It was me yesterday. So the whole reason of control at the population level and animals gives you that. So if you are able to at least control and manage within an animal population, that already the skills to isolate, the skills to treat, the vaccination campaign, the storage of those vaccines, the point of care detection itself, and being able to do, and if you translate that as an example, we, during COVID-19, literally we couldn't leave the country. And part of what we did was to pivot to do COVID-19, specifically within the border posts of South Africa, assisting mainly, I think at the time, the truckers, if you remember, they couldn't cross the borders to go to the other country. By the time they could, it became an extortion racket because they're going in and out every day. And so they're doing 6-7 tests a week. Some noses were bleeding from the rough, whatever. So it was a horrible story. And at the end, some governments decided, well, if you've been tested today, it is valid for a month. But that is just administrative. The virus doesn't know the agreement. You you are just putting something to ease what there is. What am I saying with this? I'm saying that especially when it comes to advocacy, and also work and running around inside your own borders. It means you must go as far as possible to do what? Not only to prospect, to help in the area where that outbreak is, because that's the only way you get ready for yourself. So the One Health concept in that case is really important. But then what do? I know here at home we'll complain, listen, the government didn't give enough money, or we don't have enough equipment. But in some countries, there's not even a department to deal with it. So what are you supposed to do? You get there, you have to train the people, not only a 1-week training and everybody get a certificate. I mean, in our case, as an example, in Namibia, we trained a full PhD, I think it's associate professor now. That helps you to say, when we need to do something in Namibia, who do we talk to? Who can talk to the guys? In Zambia, we've trained a PhD student done. In Rwanda, a PhD student done. In Zimbabwe, the guys submitting at the end of this year, and so on and so forth. The long-term commitment that you put into improving the human capital allows you the access back, because nobody can doubt your bona fides and how serious are you in assisting them with what you do. I'll be going to Angola in September. Part of what we are doing with Malanje University is look at what are some of the programs that we can set up that. There's no point in taking 20 South Africans, fly all the way to Kenneth Kaunda Airport and solve Zambian problems. It's not going to happen. You might do that, but how often are you going to do that? It's not going to, and in any case, when you get to the east of the country, what you thought you understand in the north, it's completely different in the east. So you need the locals and them knowing you've got their backs to do that. And for us as a company, it's just as important. We're doing now quail export program in Zambia. We've looked at Rift Valley fever and FMD in Rwanda. We are looking at the seafood chain and export within Angola. So with all those things, it allows you to open the channels for commercial understanding. And I think as far as the SMMEs are concerned as well, it means while you might not have the budget, what is it that you can offer that is genuine without overextending yourself, but also learning to say no without offending people. It's okay if you are unable to do so and not. But what happens? It means eventually some of these countries, when they have an outbreak, they pick up a phone and call you. And I know working with Dr. Tsepo here, some of the PFMA will not allow him the speed with which I could leave and go AU vision of the Africa we want. In short, Africans solving African problems. What is it within our national development plan that allows us to say we are achieving A, B, or C, and we are not being successful in 1, 2, 3? What do you get from DIRCO in terms of the personnel that they've deployed? They always do in some rougher countries where, yes, so in some of these countries, literally they deploy retired generals to the military generally do not respect civilians. It is generally so. So even if it's your own and able to speak to other generals, sometimes you get a lot more help if you allow yourself to be commanded. So the guy has been commanding everyone since day one, and he's not going to stop that now that he's retired. But generally, they are very nice people. They mean well. It's just a matter of understanding what they mean or not, and also what the character is. So I think between the science base that I think is well developed in South Africa, here it's relative to the that is doing the best it can, especially within the continent. And the kind of an open lab in terms of the samples, the issues, and the problems that plague the continent. I think we have an opportune time on what could be done and with impact, and we can show what is possible. I've just showed you what we are able to do in terms of development of human capital. But as a wrap-up, we are also looking, and I haven't spoken to Dr. Tsepo here, but we will talk. We are looking at a pilot program going into next year, together with the CSIR, I think the UCT, NMMU, and others, where we want to look at how do you bring some of the postdoctoral or postgraduate personnel and you put together real problems. In other words, where there are market outlets and these are issues within specific regions. Give them a 12 to 24 months program which sharpens their entrepreneurial skills, their understanding within the continent, but also a full-time lab where they can develop that program from beginning to launch to actually putting it in the field in a way that happens. Not in a way that we develop entrepreneurs. I think that's Dr. Mgobozi and them several people in export, we have a lot more to learn within the animal sector that is easily applicable into humans when it comes to pandemic preparedness, but also the training of enough personnel to know what are the steps to follow in terms of an outbreak.
Yeah, thank you for that ending, Dr. Piani, really relevant. We have to have enough personnel trained to know how to respond in terms of, or whenever there's an outbreak. And I like what you said about diplomacy in partnership. Often, sometimes partnerships are about what the first party who initiates the partnership wants, and we forget about the fact that partnership is something where both parties should be able um, to gain something from it. The audience engage with the panelists. If there is any questions, any comments, any insights that you'd like to offer on the topic that we are discussing. We have a question. Okay, I'll quickly walk to her to give her the mic.
Thank you, Dr. Batabile. I would just like to pick up on a point that you and Dr. Tsekwa also raised. I think you talked about the 52 states with 5 regulatory bodies, and Dr. Tsekwa was also talking about the harmonization among the continent, and I was wondering by, I think, in 15 years' time, don't quote me on my maths. So I was wondering to say, if we've only got 5 regulatory bodies currently in existence in a 52 member state continent, can we not then use this time as a platform to bring everyone together before we each have 52 divergent ideas and preferences on what we want, to rather come together at the table, obviously giving everyone a seat at the table, and some time, obviously, to sit and think about what would fit and what is possible within their context, so that when we come together, we then are able to come up with one perhaps regulatory scheme or program that would cover us essentially, because at the end of the day, we've been talking about how we want to produce vaccines, not only for South Africa, but especially the continent. So if what CSIR produces here should be able to be used in Egypt or Morocco, is what we want to do, then perhaps we should be able to then, if it is regulated in South Africa or approved in South Africa, it should be able to move across borders. So I wonder perhaps what start and move forward as one body.
Thank you for that question. I think it's something that Dr. Tsekwa can answer. He was talking about the AMA and harmonization. Would you like to respond to that, Dr. Tsekwa?
So it's a very good question, and I can only skim the surface. And we're very fortunate in this convention that we actually have. I haven't seen such a gathering of some of the top regulatory authorities and regulators on the continent and in our international organizations. So I speak in a very shallow manner, just to say that it is actually ongoing and happening. There's a session next door, concurrent with this session, that talks directly to your topic. And there we actually have the head of the AMA, as part of that session. The session I alluded to yesterday included the US FDA, the EMA, the SAPRA, and Egypt, who are among also the two 2 regulatory authorities on the continent with maturity level 3 for vaccines. And then we have 5 that have maturity level 3 for other products. Of course, we mentioned those as a highlight, you know, of those that can perform in a particular way under WHO criteria. There are other ongoing and happening really, and it's an impressive network of people in that area.
Thank you, Dr. Teko. And I think you're right. It's the first time that I'm attending Bio-Africa. It's the first time that I'm attending the Bio-Africa Convention, where I've seen this many regulators, and I am so glad because regulators are one of the people or the institutions that we often want to meet with and discuss because we are in this space. And I think Dr. Teko was not saying that we should all stand up and go to that session.
No.
Well, if you go to Africa Convention link on YouTube, you'll be able to see all the sections that have been taking place in the convention since yesterday. In fact, it only works when I'm not using it. Okay. Yeah, technologically disadvantaged. So if you go to the Bio-Africa YouTube link, you'll be able to get all the wealth of discussions that were being had since the convention started. You'll be able to see some of the training courses that we offered to the students in the weekend, which were also quite good. So please don't stand up and go to the next session. You'll be able to see it all on YouTube.
Thank you very much. I happen to work in the space of enabling partnerships. And I also, from my background, I come from Cameroon and I've traveled a bit around, and I'm based here in South Africa. And I do appreciate the fact health security. And I think it has been very much emphasized, the issue of collaboration and partnerships to enable this to happen. However, there seems to still be a need for a mindset shift, and I would like to find out what the panelists think about this, because we want to go from a place where we are being given and handed gifts to a place where we are empowered to do things by ourselves, but we also want to work in collaboration in that partnership. So some sort of an equitable partnership. However, there seems to be an aspect where in Africa, certain countries now feel like they are being handed over things, technology, knowledge from South Africa, for example. And I just want to find out, because in the partnership space, one of the things that or tenets that we hold is there has to be shared risk, shared rewards, and shared resources. And usually we stop at shared rewards. And we don't really explore shared given, because the relationship, the dynamics of the relationships changes when you feel like someone is just coming to hand over something to you, as opposed to seeing you as an equitable partner, maybe not an equal partner, but
You can go ahead.
Oh,
Dr.
okay.
King.
Thanks, ma'am. Thanks, Doc, for the question. I think it's twofold. The that's just not perspective of your good intentions or what you can offer or not. I think, for example, FMD in Africa to come to Europe. And I can tell you now, if I was European, I would have exactly the same thinking. So there's nothing wrong with what they're doing. But what do? They generally stockpile some of their vaccines in an event that happens so they can stamp it out and vaccinate. And closer to the expiry, instead of throwing them, they donate them to some of our sister countries. What are those vaccines? Very nice made vaccines, except that they are irrelevant for the strains that are circulating in that country. So they accept them, it's big fanfare, so much amount and whatever, and we vaccinate. When I go back, what do I find? Assortments of new strains of the same FMD. In short, the help that you had has just knocked you 3 years behind what you were doing. Those people that accepted are not stupid. They don't know. They don't know any better than what you do. So that's just one. But why am I using that example? Because when then you come from South Africa, as you say, they expect free. European Union gives us, European Union does ABCD. So it's like, what are you bringing? And if you don't bring, you are less than what we require to at least work with you. That's the one extreme. Okay. You have another end of the spectrum where generally there's no money. Okay. And it makes sense. There's kids with, people are fighting malaria the whole year round. There's no winter. So mosquitoes are there. Okay. So you have to see to what you need to do. But sometimes what you get is more than just the funding that you require. I'll give you a simple example. We needed to dart some buffaloes in Rwanda because we needed to know what strains are circulating, because they don't make the buffaloes sick, but they will make the cattle sick as soon as this cross linking. And the watering holes are the same anyway. And there were a few stray buffaloes outside the park that drank with cows and they just ran like crazy. The grass in Rwanda in summer are taller than me, and I don't consider myself short. So literally you don't see the buffalo 3 meters away from you. So of course, from South Africa, I'm thinking, of course, we will get that gun, we'll drive a 4x4, we will dart the buffalo. Hey, let's do what we need to do. No, you can't. So we had guys standing on top of the hill, directing us to the left. No, a bit to the right. Now, my thinking immediately is, if this thing starts running, I will not see it until it's a meter in front of me. and that thought just takes the science out of my head, and I am thinking of self-preservation. So of course, the whole day we're sweating, it's hot and whatever, and we went back and reported, listen, we need to catch those buffaloes. We have the vets here, we have everybody and whatever. This is one of the differences. They didn't give us money. Instead, they spoke to the military, they dispatched the helicopter, we launched the guy on top, they chased it, they darted it. Instead, the people were directing us to where the darted animals are. Right. Now, this is the difference. I prefer that than the money to do something, because I've got the commitment, I've got the assistance, I can do what I need to do, and we can share on that. So what I'm saying is, I think it's on a case-by-case basis, but the idea should not be, I have a program I'm going to implement, is what is it that is required in this place? What can I bring? What can I get? What do we do? The shared risk is true. Sometimes you get those that are willing to share that risk. Sometimes you get those that absolutely have never shared any risk. If anything, you must do, you must produce, and let's have it. Okay. Sometimes it might not be that. You go to that country and you're like, well, there's a proper quail industry here. If I get this to be exported to the Middle East, I'm going to make a handsome profit. Oh, I'll do the risk on their behalf so that I can get the profit that I need out of it. So on a case-by-case basis, you have to evaluate it and see what is it that works to your advantage, but also that works to the advantage of the continent as well. So those things need not be at cross purposes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Olivia. I'm gonna stop doing all the long comments that I do after each panelist speaks in order to give the audience a bit more time. I see Claudia wants to say something.
Thank you very much for the very interesting panel and for the moderation. Perhaps I'd like to react to some of the comments and call your attention on an opportunity that we have running now. We assessed a little bit and compared the research and innovation scene in Germany and in South Africa, and came to the finding that perhaps one main difference is that the private sector in Germany is very engaged, that companies are very engaged in R&D. And compared to South Africa, with particularly in the health sector, most of the funding comes from the public sector, DSI and also DOH through MRC. So we came to the idea of launching this call for proposals for consortia of startups and research institutions and universities to come to an idea, drug discovery or clinical validation or a new health technology. We have a call running and you can submit. I know there are many researchers and also entrepreneurs in the room, so you can find more information on the GIZ website. It's open until the 30th of September. I converted it now. I think it's around 7 million rand for each project, and we are willing to fund up to 6. It's going to be very aligned with the priorities of DSI and with the new VIMS strategy. So yeah, if you have any questions, please check the website. And we also have 2 information sessions. I think the first one coming this Friday. So yeah, please check it out. Thank you.
I know I said I wouldn't comment, but I need to comment on this one because I'm in that space. It's a very wonderful call for people who work in the whole health product space to be able to get some funding towards developing a product, and 7 million rand can go a long way. So I really and on the online platform, I really encourage that researchers, innovators, partner together with industry, startups, government and academic institutions for the call on developing health products.
Thank you very much. I think this question goes more to you. I think we are having no, not you. I think we are having a bit 2 main challenges in the South African innovation system. One is the funding conundrum that Dr. Puti spoke about. And secondly, I think we need to come to the appreciation that partnerships are generally complex. Now, if you look at the South Africa's gross expenditure on R&D, we're only sitting at about 0.7. The target is to make it 1% over the short term and 2% over the long term. Relatively humble as compared to what we see in Europe. Now, she made a very critical point that the private sector in Europe is actually more engaged. In Germany, and you find the same when you go to Switzerland, when you go to Sweden, and likes and likes. And I think one of the things that is causing that is the issue of incentives, partnership incentives. We have an incentive in South Africa, the tax incentives managed by the DSI and National Treasury. It had its own administrative challenges, and a discussion paper was launched. Industry, public sector officials were given the platform to comment. I was part of the team that actually commented on the scheme, right? But I think what I want to understand from you, you can clearly understand our reality that the private sector this side is not as engaged. What are those things that you did in Germany that actually made your private sector to be more engaged and see the need and have the drive to fund R&D and innovation?
Thank you. Yes, I think tax benefits are definitely an important incentive. And I think something that is quite unique from Germany is also the very close connection between education and training institutions and private sector, and at all levels. I mean, university levels, but also vocational training. And I think this is something where South Africa also, I think particularly in the last years, is a little bit still behind, and there is a need to connect it further. So it's not only R&D. I think it's the overall connection and training, and perhaps these are things that we can explore further. Also, how South Africa and Germany could, look closer into that connection. Yeah.
I'm going to come back to you. I know this question was for Claudia, but I really would like for us to get an insight in terms of the industries that work in South Africa on what it is that is the challenge in terms of countries, and how do we think we can try to find a solution for this problem. So I'm going to say this, please be as short as possible, because I'd like all three of you to just give me your insights on that.
Thank you so much. And also relevant to this, I do not have an industry partner in engagement, and that's something that we've been trying to get hold of, and I've even mentioned that challenge. So we realize that if the involvement of industry from my side is in terms of even collaboration, it doesn't have to be resource based. And that's one of the things that when we engage with industry, it's as if we were looking for funding, but it can also be information that Dr. Pihane has with regards to how do you overcome certain challenges that a startup could have with engaging or getting into a certain market. And that's just a matter of how do you open pathways for startups to kind of thrive in a way that industry has thrived, or some sort of collaboration that can lead to that. So we look into what synergies with the KPIs that they would have with regards to our startups. So we're trying to see what synergies can be, and it's something that we're really, really interested in getting into, because currently we are thriving on government to government partnership, DSI, technology agencies, but I don't think it's sustainable for our startup ecosystem. We really need industry, and I really thank you so much for the GIZ's contribution. I'm going to be also pestering on you with regards to how we can work on this challenge together. So I really appreciate this conversation. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks. I think for my side is that in trying to resolve some of the issues we have, it is really important as well to tap in to what some of the European companies do. So I'll give you an example. We have a collaboration partner in Belgium, Sagitta Group, that works on a platform for vaccine development. I don't need to do that. I talk to them and say, this is what we see in the field, this is what we're developing. What do you think you can do there? Because while DSI has been very helpful for us, I know I haven't mentioned them enough, but in all those embassies within the continent, sometimes there's a science attaché, sometimes there isn't, but there's always their counterpart that they talk to. So they assist a lot. But funding also, there are funding instruments that are possible with the European Union partners that we generally wouldn't be able to apply for. So attachment, or at least knowing some of those guys, I think is just as important for us as SMMEs within Africa to try and tap into different types of funding, because funding is always a big hurdle. But yes, understanding the market and knowing where is what, I think it's some things that we can discuss, because a product without a market goes nowhere anyway.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm tempted to comment on this topic, but maybe because of time, let me just stick to my question. Obviously, good science is not impactful unless it translates into a solution. And unfortunately, some of the discussion we're having today, I think for colleagues who are still at varsity, it's the first time they're hearing of it. So you'll finish your studies, only then you learn that a buffalo is taller than a grass. And by then it's too late. So I wanted to maybe two questions to pose this question to the colleagues from CSR on the advocates. Is there a conscious effort to introduce some of these, discussions or training, whatever the case is, as part of the curriculum, whatever? And the reason for that is it actually doesn't start when you are engaging in country-to-country engagements. For you to get funding, you need to advocate and have a level of diplomacy. I think this discussion was also clear that there are priorities. VIMS is not going to happen if the VIMS team is not diplomatic enough to convince government to prioritize VIMS, because there are other priorities. Is there such effort that maybe you guys will be making so that we don't learn this in our 40s and 50s, by then it's too late? But the second question, maybe, I think Dr. Sepp and Putu will assist. It also links to what Gwen was saying. As South Africa, the South African system is not generating enough SMMEs or companies. And that's another reason why we are not seeing industry participation. We rely on traditional industries who've got their own priorities and we're actually focusing on profits. Yet if universities, CSRs and TRs were generating enough SMMEs to come into the system, we'll probably be also starting to change the scenario. I wanted to ask maybe Tsepo in particular, based on your networks and experience, are we seeing, or do we have very structured approach or programs or framework where either technologies that have been developed through CSR and other partners get diffused to SMMEs? Are there any intentional programs where SMMEs can even have access to technologies, maybe from international partners, be it ICGB and others? Because I think if we can be conscious in pursuing those, we could really trust change, and also addressing our triple challenges of poverty and unemployment. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Sani, I'll answer the second question. Yes, I'll answer the second question. I believe the first question was for our colleagues in the science diplomacy. Yes, so the second question is really a recurring question that we get, and fortunately, the CSR has been involved in trying to support new players in biotechnology broadly into the sector. My colleague Lara, who's in a different session right now, would talk at length about our Biomanufacturing Industry Development Center initiative, where in actual fact, with money from our partners, including government, the President's Jobs Fund, the DBSA, the DSI, etc., we are able to host SMMEs that have a concept, and yet at that juncture in their development, they don't have access to infrastructure, equipment, and skills that will advance that concept towards commercial reality. So the BRDC program has been ongoing now, I think, for longer than a decade at the CSR Biomanufacturing Impact Area where I work. The latest development right now at the CSR is that realizing the difficulty of working under PFMA, realizing I think Piani said we're slow and not so agile, and he's right, and he knows us very well. The CSR launched CSR C-Cubed, which is an instrument that seeks to more deliberately translate technologies developed within the CSR towards commercial reality. And the DSI and other partners, venture capital, etc., are investing in C-Cubed to then invest in partnerships between CSR and the commercial environment. My boss, Rachel, who was in one of the plenaries, in actual fact, was quite instrumental in developing the C-Cubed initiative. Right now, CSR C-Cubed has been implemented as an entity whose purpose is exactly what you said. So in addition to those two programs I mentioned and the new developments around C-Cubed, we also have what we call expression of interests. The project you and I are working on, in fact, its culmination should be that we together, TIA and CSR, are actually launch an expression of interest call for the technology that we're working on, so that then we can more objectively select who we would like to partner with then to commercialize the technology. That has been a recurring mechanism in the past few years and has worked very, very well. In the group I had, and this is the last thing I'll say, we are very proud of the fact that 2 of the visible startups from the CSR came from the group that I currently head. I won't mention names, but some of you know, and one of them is really heading towards big things. One of them is actually here in more of the reagent space. So these are things that, truly speaking, make my work as a scientist very, very interesting, in that it's poised towards the triple challenges that you mentioned, is poised towards making sure that we make a difference to people's lives on the ground. Sensitizing young people who are studying biotechnology and allied fields to these activities and making them aware that research and development and science can lead towards societal and socioeconomic development is something that we are really quite passionate about. Me personally, we host interns in quite significant numbers in our group, and part of what we teach them and part of how we deploy them is that they work on projects that are also heading towards commercialization. So some of these things are not so visible, but I should say CSR C³ right now is actually one of the highlights of trying to make translation of our developments into businesses a reality.
So I think I'll just add on one more point to what Tsepo said in regards to the CSR. I don't know whether I stand in front here as a Bio-Africa Convention ambassador or a science diplomacy capital ambassador or a CSR employee. I'm all 3 anyway. So the CSR is having a session after this one, I think after lunch, that's focused together with GIZ, that's focusing on building local biomanufacturing capability and what programs they have towards that. So I think that would be a very good session as well to answer the first question that you had in relation to having programs that are building capability. I just it seems like Dr. Puti has something to say, and after that I'll give you an opportunity to.
I think I just wanted to quickly add on some of the things, because you mentioned CSR, but I also wanted to add the fact that in addition to what CSR is doing towards commercialization, and it's something that's very vital, that universities are also setting up this tech transfer, and I believe that there is some work that's been done towards that. But what I can say from my standpoint of view, where we work with SMEs, the biotech SMEs don't there's no clear percentage, and I'm really hoping to get a clear one, but I can tell you for sure that about 2% or 2 out of 10 that we graduate, it takes quite a long time. And I would say we have something called value of death, and it's where SMEs are not well supported towards, getting the clear market access. And it's something that we really want to get to the bottom of. And with regards to the work that CSR is doing, the work that universities are doing with ensuring this, a lot of work at the university is just a matter of sharing information, with knowing that there's innovation offices at the universities, and also a sort of free entrepreneurship training that institutions such as the Innovation Hub runs, and also universities in partnerships with other institutes like GIZ, and I think there's one that I forgot the name, but I just want to say that there's just a lot of work, but the dissemination of information is not out there for SMEs. But also the fact that there is obviously a challenge with biotech startups and products getting into the market, but it's something to get it to the bottom of, to ensure that they're well supported. But it's something that I believe that we have a lot of potential, and yeah, SMEs need to network and they need to be well supported and to thrive in this ecosystem.
I wanted to react to the 2 prior speakers before the panelists, the concern about R&D and engagement of industry, and also the issue of what is being done, to enable that. From my experience, most of the R&D sits within the universities, and the industry that we talk about when we talk about industry, and I think someone mentioned that, is usually the bigger players. And in our sector, in our industry, the biopharma industry, most of those companies have their R&D sitting elsewhere, not on the continent. So the people on the continent don't really have an agenda in R&D. That's why they will not engage with the startups. I know that for having tried both in-house with a startup and as a consultant to enable, industry partnership with startups, you wouldn't even get to have an audience to talk about partnerships with local startups and the R&D teams sitting in Europe or sitting in the US. First of all, you don't have the relationship to get that access. But even when you do that, sometimes you're so far away, you're not clued to their priorities, you're not clued to their strategy. And so you saw either very early, very far off, or you're just talking jargon, basically. So now when we talk about R&D, we need to think that it should be the early stage company startups in local settings, partnering with universities where the manpower of the expertise, the infrastructure is sitting. But now we have the challenge where the universities have a different agenda and the startups have a different agenda. Most of the times, the startups do not even have the funding. And sometimes the arrangement or the thinking is the industry partner is bringing the money to fund the research, which does not happen. So I really think where there's an issue, apart from misaligned agendas and priorities and lack of communication, is also really platforms like this where we get together and really exchange and really get to the depth of what it is that each other needs and align that to what it is that is available. And also having third parties that enable that, because if the universities are looking for funding to translate the research and the SMEs are looking for projects to take on to commercialization because they can commercialize, a CSIR can train, universities can develop, someone needs to fund that whole thing. And I think what GSA is doing is a good example of how to enable that. Because if there's no one funding, then we will keep talking this back and forth and nothing will get happening. And then one other thing I wanted to say is there's also a need, and I don't know who is doing that, but there's a need for training, for capacity building in advocacy. Most of the people who can play between these stakeholders and sort of communicate across the lines are very few, and they kind of build that skill and talent more or less by accident or by other exposure. There's no guided platform where or curriculum where people actually learn science advocacy and diplomacy. And I think if we want to enable collaboration and effective collaboration to see translation and growth of the industry, we do need to put in capacity building in terms of science advocacy and diplomacy and communication and all these other soft skills that will actually enable this. This can be training the SMEs in those skills so that they can network back with the necessary key stakeholders, or even the scientists, so that they can also understand and engage with industry in a more productive manner.
Thank you so much. And I think that's the last one. There was a call to action. I see Palisa is overlooking at me for the Science Diplomacy Capital for Africa initiative, that there is a need to train people who can do the science advocacy and policy. There's the one last question, and I think this is the last question that we're going to take, because I don't want to be the person standing in between you and lunch.
I think I'll direct this to CSIR. Can I just ask, in terms of training SMEs, what maybe I missed it because I think I came in late. What engagement does CSIR directly have in ensuring that they assist SMEs that aren't well funded? Because of course, I think there's a consultant basis towards how CSIR has been approaching it. But in the biotech space or in the meditech space, how is CSIR engaging with, especially in places where there's high competition with also a lot of SMMEs? How is CSIR engaging underfunded SMMEs?
I think I skimmed the surface of the Biomanufacturing Industry Development Center initiative, where actually the whole purpose is to support SMMEs who may well be underfunded. So with government money and other partners, we are able to serve their needs. You come with a concept as an SMME. We use our skills, infrastructure, and money from our partners to mature and translate that concept towards commercial reality without you having to invest any money whatsoever. That's how the program fundamentally works.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, so we can talk. I can see someone behind you who knows a little bit about the program, and my colleague Lara and Santosh also are. You know, I mean, Lara is actually the program manager for workforce development and for the BRDC program.
So I don't know if the panelists would like an opportunity to give some concluding very short concluding remarks before we end off the session.
Thanks for the invite, and I'm particularly excited to see that the diplomacy in science and advocacy is being looked at from the DSI standpoint with some seriousness. That makes me happy, because I think the more people travel the continent and do the science, the better for everybody. So I'm very excited about that.
Thank you.
So yes, and Batawile, thank you for the invitation. I was hesitant to join this particular panel because it sounded like it was quite peripheral to what I do. But when you then apply your mind and have your arm twisted,
and I made the concept note very easy.
Yes, you realize that actually this is a very important topic, and we can only express our support going forward to the initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Just like me, I was also hesitant, but thank you so much. I think there's quite a lot that we can do with advocating for our startups, and also having policies that are friendly towards their support and also them being inseminated in the ecosystem. So I really appreciate the platform, and also, yeah, I hope to see us being well coordinated and having frameworks that assist with everything well. Yeah, in support of all this work we're working on. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chilobe, and thank you so much for you for attending our session. I hope that I earned the privilege of your time. And for my hesitant panelists, I have each a gift. Thank you so much, and that is the end of our session.